Hi, my name is Lorraine Watry and welcome to my studio. I am a watercolor artist and I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and I thought I would start a new series of videos where I go over different tips, tricks, and techniques for working with watercolor. And hopefully these short videos will help you in your journey, and if you have a question or a technique that you would like to see, please comment below and I will try to accommodate that in a future video. Today's video is going to go over how I paint aspen trunks. I have 3 aspen trunks drawn on a block of paper, and then I have it tipped on my riser for my paintings. And I have drawn kind of the middle of the trunk. I'm not showing the top of the tree or the leaves or any of that. I'm just showing how I do the trunks. And one of the things to think about with aspen trees is that we tend to think of them as white, but they can have quite a bit of color, and sometimes it will be color that is bounced back from maybe the golden leaves that are above in the canopy, and the light going through there can create a glow on the trunks of the trees. And then sometimes it's because the trunk itself has some tone to it. It's not pure white. And so I'm going to do those 3 varieties, and so I'll do this one as white, and this one will have some bounce color or bounced light, and then this one will have tone on the trunk, I guess is how I'll label it. And I just did a few varieties of some marks that are on the trunk, and so I'll talk about that as I get farther along on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is the white trunk. And you could do this a couple ways. One is to start with a little bit of tone on the trunk to give it a little bit of roundness, or you could just add, put your shadows on there. And so this would be a very lit trunk is what I'm imagining. I'll have the light come from the left side, and then it could have a very strong shadow on it. I will go ahead and use a little bit of color on the trunk itself just to give it a little bit of roundness before I apply the shadow to it later. And because I'm going to leave the trunk basically as white, I am going to use some cerulean and maybe a little bit of quin magenta to give it some form to the trunk itself before I shadow it. And I use a variety of colors on the trunks that I do. So this is just one example, but you could use other options as well. And I am wetting the left side of the trunk. And sometimes it helps to rotate your board so that the light side is on the upper section. And we'll see if I can get this to work without doing that today. And I'm going to dry the back of my brush because I'm taking some of the moisture out so that it doesn't move too quickly into that water. And this is a new paper that I will discuss in another video, but it's one I'm trying out. And so I'm just bringing the cerulean and quin rose mix that I made kind of down the center, letting some of it fade to the left as it catches the water. And then I think I will use a little bit of the pure cerulean on the right side. And it may not show up a lot. It may just be a minor color change, but I like to have a little bit of variety. And depending on where your aspen is, you might find some bounce back light. So even if the sunlight is coming from the left, you might notice that something around the tree, whether it's the sky or something in the land, is causing some light to light the opposite side of the tree. So the majority of the white would be on this side, but then there might be a little bit of some highlight on the opposite side too. And that would be the first coat for that one. Now for bounce back light, because I'm imagining there's maybe a golden canopy of leaves above it, I am going to get out some New Gamboge and my warm red is Parole Scarlet, but you might have cadmium red on your palette that is similar. And that warm red is a way to get a warm glow on the tree. And then I'm going to get out Quin Magenta. And I may use it, I probably will use it with a little bit of either the cerulean or cobalt. And I have done both in the past. And because I have, I have the cerulean out, I will maybe use it with that. So I will do the same thing again. I'll just keep the light consistent today and I'll have it all come from the left side. And generally in a forest of aspen, you will see, and I'm going to go ahead and put some water down as I'm talking. Generally for a forest of aspen, you will see kind of the same kind of aspen trunk in an area. It might be a little mixed here and there because they travel through their roots underground, so you may get a different host plant or tree that has a little bit of a different look to the trunk. And so I'm using the New Gamboge on the lit side of the trunk, and so that will be the glow on that side. And I'm just pulling it down, and I placed water there, and now I'm going over where the water is. And I did not put the water over on the left side of the tree. I could have, but I just decided to put it down the one side. And that will allow my warm red might move toward the left a little bit as I place it on there. And then I'm going to use the Quin Magenta with a touch of the cerulean in it, but I want to keep it more on the red side of purple. And I need to do this with a little bit of speed because if I wait too long, then that red will have started to dry, and I forgot I was going to leave just a little bit of room on the left for some cerulean. Now this may look like a rainbow tree at this moment, and I totally understand that feeling. But as this dries, it will meld together a little bit, and then when I put a darker value around the tree, then it won't feel a little odd, because right now it can feel very odd. All right, so there's that one. And then if there is tone on the trunk of the aspen, then you might notice that it has kind of a taupe feel to it. And I have a couple options. I'm going to show you Tiger's Eye today. If you don't have Tiger's Eye in your palette, and this is a Daniel Smith granulating Primatech pigment, and it is, I think, very good for aspen trunks when they have some tannish feel to them, because it just really mimics that color. But if you don't have that, you can use Quin Gold, and you would just want a little bit of the Quin Gold with a purple. And so you're trying to get sort of a taupe or a tan feel when you make that mix. So for this tree, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the others. I'll wet the left side, and then I'm coming right in with the Tiger's Eye. So if you didn't have the Tiger's Eye, this is where you'd have the Quin Gold mixed with some purple to give you a color that's similar to this. And this won't be really dark. So if you feel like you're not, if you feel like you're not getting enough value on there, then I would maybe go back into the Tiger's Eye, which I didn't quite get enough. There we go. Because it does dry lighter, so it's going to dry 20 to 30% lighter. And then I'm going to use the cerulean with a touch of the Quin Magenta again and make a purple, drying my brush a little bit. And coming right next to that tiger's eye, leaving a little space. I tend to really like putting the cerulean. Sometimes I'll use peacock if it's got a really blue kind of glow to it. Peacock is really brilliant for that. Or now I have the phthalo blue turquoise on my palette, so that would be another option. And I'm going to bring the cerulean that I'm using right now down the trunk for that glow on the opposite side. And then I need to dry these, so I will pause, and generally these two are ready to dry. This one is still shiny and damp, and usually I won't dry it until it's lost the shine, so that it gives time for the colors to react and blend and do whatever they're going to do on the paper. So you won't see me wait for this one to dry because I'm going to crop the video, but I will dry these and I'll be right back. So now that I have them dry, I am going to go ahead and place some color on the outsides of each of the trees so that you can see them better. And that will help give me an idea of how dark the trunks feel, to have that darker value next to them. The other thing that I do generally when I am painting is that I work from light to dark. And because the Aspen trunks generally are lighter than a lot of the things in the image, they tend to get painted first. So if this was an actual painting, I might have my other trees and foliage and other things around them, but I would probably start with the Aspen trunks. Now, if this is a snow scene or some other scene where there's lighter things around the trees, I might paint those things first. So I'm just going to go ahead and use, I'll probably use maybe my ultramarine blue and some Quin Gold for a dark green, and I'm not going to try to make a scene. I'm just going to give it some value around the trees. So I'll go ahead and pull that out. And my ultramarine is by Holbein. I like how it works with other pigments. And I also have ultramarine deep on my palette, and it's a darker ultramarine, thus the name. See if I can get some Quin Gold. With the way I have my palette laid out, I have to reach around the pole that holds my lights, and so it makes it a little harder to get out. All right, so I have the ultramarine and the Quin Gold, and I'm just going to make a darker color, and I think I'll just rotate my board for this, just so that I can go ahead and come next to the tree. And there is a little bit of variety on my brush because I had a yellower area and a bluer area on my palette, so I'm getting some variety happening down that path of color I just put on, so that makes it look cool. And I like that when I'm doing something where you have a background. I don't necessarily want my backgrounds to always have a single color. I like to have some variety in there. So I'll have it varied from blue to yellow, green to green. And maybe I'll go a little warmer. Go ahead and rotate it over here again. Well, I didn't go very warm. It's still green. And this would, in this situation, would probably be evergreen back behind the Aspen if it's a fall day, because the color of this Aspen tree would, as I said, be reflecting the canopy and the glow of the light coming through it. And I'm running out of Quin Gold. I probably should just fill that in as well because it looks a little odd. And it probably is going to cause a bloom because I am trying to go back into an area that's already drying. So what I'm going to do is go over that whole section again because that will help equalize the moisture. So if you had that same situation, my paint was still just barely damp on both sides, and because I wet in the center with a wetter brush, if I left it like that, it would cause blooms on either side. And so same thing here where this one is drying. If I come into it quick enough and just go back over it, basically I can keep that paint slightly damp before it's completely dry, and then I can continue that color. And I'm going to get out some more ultramarine, and it's just easier to turn it right now. When I'm working on a big painting, I don't necessarily do this, but if I can rotate my paper and make it easier for whatever shape I'm painting on, then I do that. Okay, so we're starting to see the trunk stand out, and then I'll finish the last one right quick. And now the trunks shouldn't feel as strong. This one is still really got that warm glow on it, but they should feel like they are a white tree trunk, and they will really feel like a white tree trunk once I get the dark marks on there. Okay, so I have that background color in. There is some bad marks in here, but if this were an actual scene where things had started to dry a little bit and then I tried to come back in and fix it, most of that's not going to matter because it's going to be in the background and it could be part of the foliage and the texture of the background. So I'm not going to worry about that. So I need to dry this again, and then I will be right back. I have dried the background, and so I am ready to go ahead and put some shadow on the trunks of the trees, and then I can put the marks on top of that. And generally, if I'm working with an aspen scene, just painting one layer of value on there before I might shadow it is not necessarily the way I leave it. So it would depend on what else is going on around it. I might decide this trunk needs to be darker, or some part of the trunk might need to be darker. So I can show you that on this one. If I was only going to paint, maybe the lower section of it needed to be a little darker compared to something up above. So there might be something down here that I need to darken the value of the lower section. So I can just paint water on the upper part of it, and that gives somewhere for the darker value that I'll be putting on here to move to without creating a hard edge. And so I'm going to get out the tiger's eye again, and I'll just do that same process. And I might go ahead, I did not put any water over here, but I think I will, so that it has a little bit of a lighter side to it. And I can pull that up just a little into the water. And then I will use some of the Quin Magenta again. And a little bit of the cerulean on that side. And so this would obviously depend on the values around the tree, maybe what's happening with the tree itself. Sometimes light hits the upper part of the tree and then this lower part is in shadow, or just the trunk itself has got a little bit of a value change. And then sometimes I do that in order to make parts of a shape separate from something that's around it. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and put some shadow on it, and I think I'll use one of the colors that I like to use, which will be cobalt, and the warm red, which is my Parole Scarlet, and I'm making a muted purple with this. So I want it to have a little bit of a purple feel, but be muted, not be really vibrant purple. And so then I am just working from my imagination today, so I'm imagining that there will be some branches that are coming down. Maybe there's another one up here from up above, and maybe the whole back side of this tree is shadowed. And I'm just going to bring the color down, and then as I'm coming down every now and then, and I could even make it look like some leaves are in the shadows by just making some aspen leaf type shapes. And I'll just bring that down, and maybe one more branch here. So that would be the shadowed side of a very lit sunny tree. And so I'll let that one dry, and then this one is a little subtler because it has that glow from the foliage above, but it might also have some shadows. And I'm going to use the Quin Magenta and Cerulean mix for this purple because I used it on the side of the tree over there. And again, some broken shadows here and there, and depending on what's around the tree, it may not completely cover the back side of the tree. I want a little more blue in a couple places on here for the shadow. And then I think I'll leave it that. Maybe I'm kind of playing now. Okay, so now I have a shadow on that tree, and then I need to let that dry. This one is still wet down here, so I'll go ahead and dry it again one time, and then I can shadow this tree, and then we'll finish up with the marks on the trees. I've now finished drying the trees again, and I am going to add the shadows to the left tree, and I'm using the Cerulean and Quin Magenta. And again, it wouldn't necessarily have to be these colors. It's just what I have on my palette right now, and so I am going to go ahead and use them, and I am giving this tree some shadows and a variety of marks like I did the other two. And for this one, I'm going to use some of the Cerulean on the back side again and increase the look of the Cerulean. But you could just use some water along that edge as well if you wanted it to have a little bit of a lighter bounce back look without adding color. And I'm adding the Cerulean right there. And then because those other two trees are dry, I'm going to go ahead and start adding some of the marks to the first two trees that would be the marks that you see on aspen trees. And I'm using my number 2 brush. It's a smaller brush, and ultramarine blue and then burnt sienna will be my mix. And I find that I like that mix for a dark, almost black color instead of an actual black, because one, I can vary it to be warmer or cooler, and it's not maybe as strong as a black might be. In a landscape, black for me tends to be a little too strong. And aspen trees have a variety of marks, as I said earlier, and so you might see a mark that looks kind of like an eye coming out the side of the tree, and they tend to have a little bit of a curve that comes down from that area. And this mark on the front of the tree would also be an eye on the tree, and that is where branches have fallen off, and it leaves that mark on the tree. And I'm looking for not necessarily covering the whole shape that I just painted. Sometimes I'll leave little openings here and there. And any of the lines that kind of curve around the tree, you need to remember perspective. And so as those marks go up a tree, if it's above the horizon line, they would curve down just a little bit on the sides. And if it's below the horizon line, then they would curve up just a little bit on the sides of that mark that goes around the tree. You might also see little dots of darker marks that would be on the tree. And sometimes the eye shapes aren't as big and round. Sometimes they'll just be a kind of almond shape, I guess, would be a way to describe it. On the one I'm doing right now, I did put a little bit of a line underneath it, because you will also see that where it feels like the mark is coming out from the tree just a little bit, and it defines the look of that shape. Also, if your mark that you're putting on the tree is in shadow, generally it's going to be darker on the shadow side and lighter on the sunlit side. And I show that later on. I think it's the last tree that I show that. Oh, and the second tree. And I also don't always put every mark that I'm seeing on my image on the trunk, because sometimes it can feel like it's too much. So I would err on going slow, and if the tree is closer to you, you're going to see more of the marks than you might if there is a tree in the distance. Same thing again, and I use the same colors no matter what the color of the tree is. I guess you could vary it if you wanted to, and just kind of moving down this tree and adding those darker marks in there. And now the trees should start to feel lighter. They should, with those dark values going in, that can really help that tree, start to feel a little more rounded, because those marks help give it some form, but also it can help lighten the look of the tree. And right here, I'm using the side of my brush, and I'm skimming it over the paper to get a dry brush effect that you will often see on aspen, where either the sap has, where a mar is on the tree, has kind of come down the tree and left a tone on the tree, or maybe just something about the trunk is a different color. And so that dry brush effect is a really good way to create that look. And here I'm going back and getting a little more color. I had run out of the burnt sienna, and you want to use, when you're trying to do a dark like this, you want to use a lot of pigment, not a lot of water. And so there's a fine line between having too little water or too much water. And I am showing here how you can darken the side that's in the shadow side, and then lighten the opposite side if you need to. Actually, I'm not sure if I do lighten. I may not on this one, but I do on the last tree. And a few more of the marks. Now, those marks that are kind of the lines that go around the tree are actually ridges. And so sometimes it feels like it's just a darker line going around the tree, but if you really look at your images or look at aspen when you're out, you might be able to see that there is a lighter ridge or line, and then the darker line is actually the shadow under there. And so here I'm showing how you can go in with a flat brush and a little water, and you can lift a lighter line out of your shadow areas or colors that are on the tree to give it the feeling of a ridge and a lighter line. Now, generally, I will lift those lines and then put the shadow under, but sometimes I'll do this where I go back and lift that lighter line if I've either forgotten to or I decide I want them on there. And I think I go and show one on this tree as well here. And then I'll use my paper or my towel, not my paper towel because I'm not using paper towels. I'll use my towel to go ahead and dab at that area if it leaves a little bit of color and I want to lift it a little better. And I'm going to dry that tree to make sure the shadow's dry, and then I'll be right back. So I've dried that part of the trunk, and then I can come back again with those same colors, get out a little bit of ultramarine and the burnt sienna, and go ahead and get some marks on this one. And I don't know that I've ever really noticed that the different colors on the trees can give you different color in the marks. It might vary depending on the light. So that would be something to look at. You might notice that the marks on the tree feel a lot lighter, or they feel darker, or some part of it feels like it's standing out a little bit more depending on the light or the color of the trunk. So that would be something to be aware of. And since I'm not working from different photographs for these, then I can't tell you right now. And then again, one thing to be aware of would be if you have a mark on the lighter side of the tree, you might come back and you could paint it on slightly darker and then just come back and dab a little bit. And by lifting a little bit of that darker value, that will make it feel like it's being hit by light. And I'll go ahead and put a few marks down on the bottom. Oh, I forgot I had a bigger mark on this tree, so I want to go get a little more burnt sienna. And the reason is because these trees get marred either by animals in the area or maybe something's happened to the trunk, and so they will have some big dark shapes that is a scar. And I don't have enough water. I keep trying to use it with it very dry. Okay, so I'm going to put a big shape over here, and then I will use a little bit of the burnt sienna in the center just to vary the color. And some rough edges. Okay, so there's 3 trunks with some variety of color to them and different reasons why they might have that different color. And then one last thing I'm going to do is just put a few branches on right quick, and I'll go ahead and have it come out of one of the darker marks, but sometimes they're coming from behind the tree, so you might see that as well. And I'm using that almost looks like arms because I placed them right next to each other. So I'm going to come up here and put a smaller branch up above there. And so using your brush, and I am actually going to be doing a video talking about using a liner brush. This is not a liner, but it kind of can be used with sort of that same feel. You want to sort of have the branches feel like they're kind of a little broken and twisted. You don't want them to be too straight. That tends to make them look less realistic, but it can depend on the kind of tree that you're doing. Let's see, maybe I'll go ahead and have one come out of here, and I want the end near the trunk to be bigger. So I have a variety of branches on there now, and the shadows and the darker shapes on the different aspen trunks. So I hope this was interesting to see how you can create aspen trunks and the marks and the values and the different colors. And if you would like to see more tip and trick videos, please follow along. And if you have a suggestion for a video, please leave a comment in the section below and I will add it to my list. And I do have classes on my website and some video lessons that are purchasable. So please take a look at that, and I hope you have a good day. See you next time. Bye.